regularly scheduled public meeting of the Taxicab Authority Board of the State of Nevada. It's Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, and the hour is 9:30 a.m. We're at the Nevada State Business Center, 230 West Sahara Avenue, Suite 400, the Nevada Room, Las Vegas, Nevada. And the record should reflect that present are all 5 members of the board. Also the administrator and our staff attorney and Jack. Member Decker, would you lead us in the?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have reviewed notices and affidavit posting, and it appears to me, Madam Secretary, this matter has been properly posted and noticed under the open meeting law. Do you concur?
Yes.
Our second agenda item is presentation of life-saving award. Administrator Clark.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Sure.
Can you delay 10 seconds?
I can delay 15.
I'm sorry, everybody. This is my wife, Deborah.
Hi, Deborah.
So back in September of this year, Investigator Miller was out on patrol, and he was down by the stratosphere, and he had some bystanders flagging him down, telling him that somebody was in distress over by a bus stop. And when Investigator Miller got over there, he found a gentleman unconscious, barely breathing. He attempted some sternum rubs. You don't know what those are. They hurt really bad, and they usually wake people up. But to no avail. This gentleman did not respond at all. Some of the gentleman's friends were there, said that in the past they had administered Narcan to him. Investigator Miller calmed collectively. He was able to get a hold of dispatch, get a hold of the ambulance to get them to come over, and got to his car, got some more Narcan, gave him a couple of different doses of Narcan, and the guy popped up, just like what you see in the movies or how you hear it on TV. The guy popped up, really didn't want to have anything to do with Investigator Miller or the ambulance crew that had showed up. But because of his quick actions, another life was saved. And so we have gotten the life-saving award that we're going to present to Investigator Miller.
Nice.
Wow.
I've never had somebody do that before. That would be great.
Maybe I should ask your wife's permission.
She's not a jealous type.
Not at all.
Yeah, approved.
Yeah.
Here's the administrator who's more nervous than the recipient.
Right.
First time. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
You.
Agenda item 3 is our first public comment session. This matter is set on our agenda pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute 241 for the purpose of taking comments from the public who may wish to address us on matters within the jurisdiction of the Taxicab Authority. We may not take action on any of these matters, but we welcome any members of the public here present or participating remotely who have public comment. Are there any members of the public present in the room in Las Vegas that would like to comment? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, is there anybody online who would like to make public comment?
No.
Seeing no public comment, we'll close agenda item 3. Agenda item 4 is review of our prepared minutes of November 20, 2024. Members of the board have all had an opportunity to receive them. Member Decker did not participate in that meeting. So as to the others present, are there any additions, changes, or corrections? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of November 20th. Are there any further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Member Decker abstaining. The next item on our agenda is item 5. This is a matter set on our regularly scheduled agenda to take industry comments and discussions on matters within our jurisdiction they would like to bring to our attention. Is there any member of the industry that would like to comment or bring something to our attention other than what's already going to be coming up on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll close item 5. Item 6 is a further discussion and potential action of the board-initiated timing and process for annual review of rates pursuant to NRS 706-8819, 706-8824, and NAC 706-471. Ms. Webb brought to my attention that, as the board members know, we have a statutory obligation to annually look at rates and adjust them if we think necessary. As the board members who've been here for a bit may recall, we did a general rate case recently, and we decided that we would let some time pass after that general rate case before we did an annual review. I had her place this matter on the agenda to discuss when the board would please to actually consider our obligation, take up the issue of rates. And my recommendation is that we do so in the first quarter of next year, but kind of set that today so that the industry has foreknowledge of when we're going to act. And if they want to bring something to our attention, they will be on notice to bring it forth. So I'll open it up for any comments the administrator might have before we to the board. Any preferences as to when we do it?
No, I think that's a good idea, the first quarter of the year. I think that'll give us some time to get minds together too. That'd be good.
Okay. Bring it back to the board. Member Decker?
No preference. I have no preference.
No, I'm okay.
Okay. I'd accept the motion to put it on the March agenda.
So moved. I'll second the motion.
Been moved and seconded to place review of the rates pursuant to cited statutes and regulation on the March agenda of the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Great. That takes us to agenda 7. We are moving right along. This is the continued public hearing on our initiated proposed future special events order for surcharges and for modification of rates and service requirements provided during those special events that we might designate. Ms. Webb has kindly provided us a draft order. Draft order flags for us places where the proposed order is different from what the LOA has suggested. As you recall, we have an F1 order, had an F1 order in order for the November. This would be, Ms. Webb, I'm going to ask you to summarize the places where there's differences, but this would be placing, as Vice Chair Soderberg suggested in one of our earlier hearings, an order in place for a year-long period, the year of 2025. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Could you just flag for us the places where there's differences of opinion between staff and,
Well, I believe staff, the sphere is first.
pardon?
The sphere is first, page 5.
Okay.
Pickups at the sphere. Staff shows that one. And also EDC and the F1. The remainder are from the industry. And we put those in there so that you can discuss.
So the industry proposals are New Year's Eve, CES, SHOT Show, excuse me, NAB, SEMA, and New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve again. Excuse me. And thank you, sir. And there was one other correction on times, right?
I think we need to look
On
at
EDC.
SEMA and NAB. And EDC, I changed that. Cheryl helped me out with that this morning.
And I also see, last month we talked about actually putting in actual dates. So
Yes.
those are now in there.
Mr. Chair, comments whenever you're ready.
Pardon?
I have comments if you're.
I was gonna see if any member of the industry wants to address us before we bring it to the board. Your suggestions are all in here. I'm not saying they'll sail through it. Okay. Then I'm gonna bring it to the board, and Member Decker, go ahead.
So I feel like we are missing the target. Let's just say, to sum up, we've discussed the reasons, specific geographic reasons for EDC. We've discussed specific volume reasons regarding the Super Bowl, and there are, traffic reasons for F1. But I don't think we just started celebrating New Year's Eve in Vegas, and the NAB and the SHOT Show and CES are all things that are annual and have been for a long time. So I am not clear on the reasons why those annual, regular, predictable events are on the list when this started out as being a way to get drivers in cabs for specific events that had specific obstacles to getting taxis out. So this entire list, other than EDC and F1, does not seem like it's in the purview of what we originally set out to do. And then to staff, I don't know if we've heard justification for the sphere being on the list, or at least I haven't. I missed last meeting. I don't know if it was discussed, but that one would also be one of those regular type regular events, and I'm not exactly sure the reason for all of those being on the list.
So I'll first address the sphere issue, and then the administrator can chime in.
Okay.
Last month, Administrator Hart suggested that we consider some venues as special events because of what happens there. The sphere was one. The second that was discussed was Allegiant Stadium, and the third was T-Mobile, as I recall.
Correct.
It appears to me, and there were reasons given in that what goes on there is a special event, and when you have a U2 or whatever concert, and there have been some historic problems with taxicab service to the sphere. And we discussed similar issues with T-Mobile and Allegiant. I do note, and so my question to add on to yours is, I note that T-Mobile and Allegiant aren't here. So I would like to know what the thought process was,
Okay.
Administrator, and maybe you can, in that same answer, Member Decker's question.
So it was my opinion that these three venues have a large amount of people that are exiting a venue at a specific time, and it's been historically difficult to get people out of there, specifically at the Sphere. I've had one of my supervisors go down there. There were 400 or 500 people standing in line waiting for cabs, and there were no cabs available. It was, I've spoken with the people at MSG, the Sphere, several times, and it's an ongoing problem after most Eagles concerts or like U2 or something like that. Of course, the clientele for those events are people that like to get into cabs, and they like to take the cabs instead of rideshare, and so we just had a difficult time getting cabs over to that area. Because of the size of Allegiant and T-Mobile, I thought that those would be a good place to do a venue surcharge as well, whether it's a Raider game or a Britney Spears concert. I think the volume of people are going to be there. To fast forward, the reason that those two venues are not on here is really it's a logistical issue where you can't geofence for T-Mobile where there's no taxi stand. So you can't geofence for a taxi stand at T-Mobile. Allegiant Stadium, there is a taxi stand over there, but it's way out of the way and down the street. You make a right-hand turn and then you might find it. And it would be a difficult situation again to geofence that right there. And I think Dr. Weekly and we've discussed this, and I think he's on board and trying to help get a solution. But for this order, I don't think we would be able to get that area geofenced for a surcharge.
So is there pickup and drop off at the Sphere? Because I thought that was a problem also.
That is the problem, is pickup and drop off. But the drop off for the event, people are kind of flowing in, over an hour and a half, maybe even a 2-hour period of time. When the show gets out, you've got 15,000 people coming out and getting in line to get a cab, and
I understand that, but if the venue hasn't established a safe pickup and drop off, flooding that area or reducing more drivers to show up isn't necessarily going to solve the problem if there's nowhere to pick up and drop off, except for you have people jumping into cabs on the street.
Well, we do. There is a cab stand, and I'm going to speak about it. Yeah, and there was a cab stand prior to F1. This last race, the cab stand used to be right in the middle of the racetrack. So obviously, when F1 shows up, they have to tear that down. I just spoke with MSG yesterday, and we've got another cab stand. We've got a dedicated ingress and egress taxi travel lane to get in, and hopefully that's going to help some too. So, and I'll speak more about that when it's my turn to talk. But there is a designated cab stand at the Sphere.
Okay, I guess my concern is a couple things. One is the intent of this was to induce drivers to get behind the wheel for events that had very specific problems, not just people don't want to go pick up at, Mandalay Bay because the cab stand gets too obstructed, not that kind of thing. But EDC and F1, there were very specific things that we were trying to address. I am not a fan of taking annual events that happen every year that we've dealt with for decades and all of a sudden saying, now we're going to impose a surcharge. Why didn't we impose it last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago? And I don't think it was the intent of the surcharge. The other thing is, if I'm worried on behalf of public, but also industry, that if we start imposing a surcharge by venue, which impacts the venue's business and the cost to the public of attending an event, they're going to come back and say, hey, we want to cut because you guys, every time you pick up at the Sphere, you're charging the customer $10, and that's $10 less he's going to spend at our venue. So we want 3 out of that $10. I think the airport does that, don't they? So I think that's a recipe for inflating costs by looking at specific events. And that's just my 2 opinions and my 2 concerns about the order as it stands.
When you're talking about the airport, you're talking about the $2.40 per tag on?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But a venue, Allegiant, could say, hey, we're not going to let anybody use our cab stand unless you start giving us $3 per surcharge that the industry's taking.
First of all, when I look at this order, we spent a year, a little over a year, doing things on a event or timeframe basis. And the thought is this was experimental. And I know the industry learned a lot. I know we learned a lot. Some things worked, some things didn't. Some things had a lot of pushback from the public, some did not. But now I see we're getting into the second full year and we're going in a completely different direction with most of these. Now we're looking at conventions, which we didn't really test out last year. So I would look at this as almost a new test. We don't know how this is going to work. I might differ with Board Member Decker. Getting in and out of places is hard. And if I were a cab driver, I would not go there unless I absolutely had to, unless there was an incentive. It is the fault of the venues that it's hard. All of these venues that we discussed just now did not design for this. We're hoping that the new baseball stadium designs for this. If there is a basketball stadium south of town, they did design for this, but the Sphere did not design for this. Allegiant did not design for this. T-Mobile did not design for this. So yeah, that's why cab drivers don't want to go there. And I don't blame them. You're going to spend a lot of time, or you could be getting rides 2 blocks down the strip and making more money. So I understand that. And I don't have a problem with it. Maybe they will want to cut it sometime, or maybe they'll start figuring the problem. This is a problem the developers of those properties made. This is not because it's just too busy. It's not because of any other circumstance. They made this problem. And now their customers can't get a cab ride home. I'm thinking if I go to the Sphere, I'm going to, in my head, I'd be thinking, well, God, could I park at Venetian and just somehow walk through the whole hotel to get there? Because I know I don't want to be down there. So I don't have a problem with things that are designed for specific locations that have created the problem. I guess what I worry about is I wouldn't want this to be considered a template for an annual order when we are really hitting on these conventions. And I know when these certain conventions come in, the town is locked down. You don't want to grab lunch within 2 blocks either way of the strip. It's insane. And maybe, I don't know that we've gotten a lot of testimony on that, but maybe cab drivers don't want to work at that time. Maybe the lockdown is so egregious that they make less money, even though there's more people that need to be driven. And I don't know that. But it seems to me we're taking a different track. We were focused on special events before, and now we have a couple of special events, but now we have conventions too, which I guess if you look at these ones, they are special because they're so big. But Member Decker's correct. This is not news, and it wasn't news last year. It wasn't news 20 years ago. These are all long-standing shows that have been here, and they've always been the big ones as long as I can remember. I don't have a problem with New Year's Eve. I was surprised that it wasn't brought forward last year. It's a little different in its character than some of the other things on this list, but I don't have a problem. I mean, you can't get on the strip, which cuts access. But I haven't heard that drivers don't want to work New Year's Eve. Maybe that's true, and we haven't seen any testimony. Or they want to work New Year's Eve, but they're specifically avoiding certain areas because Las Vegas Boulevard is locked down and there's things. So I don't know. I don't think my gut feeling tells me New Year's Eve is probably a good idea, and this is a very small surcharge, but I don't think we've heard much about that outside of, hey, it's real busy. So I'd like to hear more on that before we make a decision. So that's my 2 cents, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm listening to Board Member Decker's comments. He makes some very valid points, but I also understand in terms of the incentives that we're talking here. Thank you to Administrator Park. He and I have been in communication, and I told you that I tried to do that, Mr. Chairman, to speak with Patrick Garvey, who heads up a lot of the transportation here in Southern Nevada. And what I got him to agree to is he's willing, if this board approves, he's willing to come and be an item on our agenda to talk about what is it that we can do collectively to find some compromises here. He's willing to sit at the table and talk with this board and the industry. His concern was that he just didn't want the industry to jump all over his head. Listen, at the end of the day, you know, it's about dollars and cents. Time is money and money is time. Let's be real up in here, okay? Talking with Mr. Garvey, you know, very pleasant guy. And again, I just want to give Mr. Park his kudos because he's been out there with some boots on the ground trying to help resolve this issue here. This is one I think that's very doable. When you look at Allegiant Stadium right now, I think our staging is we're in the end lot, if I'm not mistaken. And so what they're looking at doing, what they could possibly do, and he'd have to go back to those who he contracts out with because he's a contractor through the Raiders. And so to be able to go back and just make sure that they're okay with it as well, and which I believe that they would be, you know, because we want to make sure that we provide as much convenience as possible. And I know it'd be a big relief for law enforcement as well to make sure that we have some type of coordinated efforts. And so I saw on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, that there's an item, the last item on the agenda is for future agenda items. And I'd like to respectfully ask if this board and the administrator and the industry would allow Mr. Garvey to be an item on one of our future agendas to come and talk to us about how we can help remedy this problem, because there's also a possible solution to what's going on over at the Sphere as well. And I don't know if it was Board Member Decker who said it, one of you guys said it, whatever the build out's going to be for the A's stadium on, what is that, Tropicana, Las Vegas Boulevard, will be a nightmare if we don't get in on the front end. And so it's just a matter, in my opinion, having served on a number of boards before here in Southern Nevada, getting people at the table and just communicating and talking. I believe that we also need to invite Virginia Valentine, who's the president of the Nevada Resorts Association, to one of our meetings to she's a voice for a lot of the resorts. And if there are concerns, she knows how to get the CEOs and the powers to be on the phone or in person to talk to them to figure out how we can remedy this problem. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm available however I can assist. And I gave you my word I'd get with Patrick, and I did, and he's willing. I got him to agree to come and speak to this board.
Great.
Thank you.
So I did my own little inspection or investigation last week. I went to rodeo a couple of different times.
That's right.
And the rodeo is conspicuously not on this list. And I think I know why. It's because they have the infrastructure.
Yes.
It's in place. I know it's a lot of infrastructure. There's 2 lots across the street. There's staging. There's everything else. There's the loop in front of the Thomas and Mack. And go figure, something that was built in the 80s is the thing that is handling what the infrastructure needs to handle in terms of the TNC and the taxis. So I take Member Weekly's comments very poignantly as to the A's, and we're getting to a cutoff point also. We are definitely getting to a cutoff point in the things that everybody has seen, the drawings and in the paper and whatnot. And the infrastructure should or needs to be in place, whether that's a street, whether that's a lane, whether it's something like that. But how can they do for 10 days in a row, 15,000 people leaving at 8:45 every night and making it to their shows at 9 o'clock all across the strip? That happens. That happens. And that's the reason why they keep coming back every year, despite the fact that there was the ad on the billboard that says, hey, do we need to go back to Oklahoma City? No, we don't want them to go back to Oklahoma City. So that ad made me think about this. That ad up there, that there's a telephonic poll that they were taking, hey, do we need to go back to Oklahoma City? No, we don't. So when I look at this order and I look at these dates and I look at these events, and whether it's a physical place, whether it's an annual event or something like that, I see it as we need to make it the most convenient and efficient thing for the public and the industry. So, because the industry is here to serve the public, and that's what it's for. I appreciate Member Decker in that he's talking about events that we've had for years and that are handled for years. But I also think that those are events that potentially we could have drivers saying, no, I take New Year's off every year, or I take this off every year. And maybe this is an effort to change that. And I guess taking Member Soderberg's comment in conjunction with that is, maybe this is our analysis. This is our investigation. Okay, how was it this last New Year's? Was the transportation better? Were people getting picked up and dropped off more efficiently? That sort of thing. So again, item number 6 is we're supposed to review the rates on an annual basis and everything else. I think we kind of taken this in conjunction with that. And I guess any consideration that I would say is, again, what Chairman Reeser said is that this isn't set in stone. This is an order that I think we're going to have to tinker with on an annual basis. So I don't have a problem with these items that are identified or these events that are identified because of all of those things. The fact that if we're talking about infrastructure and we can get something done with the Legion and we can get something done with baseball, we can get something done with the NBA, it only looks good for us in terms of Nevada, in terms of transportation, in terms of people wanting to come here and go to these events.
So here are my thoughts. On the Sphere, I've just heard enough, both in the hearing room and out of the hearing room, that convinces me that we should proceed with that surcharge. It is quintessentially a special event when you have a big name performer at a single location, not in residency. It, to me, seems it's not exactly like EDC, but it is a place. It is closer, and it doesn't have some of the public safety issues, but it has other sub-public safety issues, and there is not a readily available cab stand. That's why they've had one there. So I think the Sphere is an appropriate venue-based type of surcharge. I am encouraged, Dr. Weekly, that we put on the agenda and have a discussion with the Legion, because since I came on the board, even before I was chair, one of the first sets of complaints that I was getting on the phone is what a nightmare it is for both the industry and for the traveling public to get taxi there. And I get it reminds me a good deal of when they opened up the baseball stadium in downtown San Francisco. That's a nightmare. It's easier to come in from Sausalito on a boat than it is to get a cab, betraying my sports inclination. On New Year's Eve, I initially was not in favor of this. What convinced me was the testimony last month, which likened it to F1 in the sense that the strip is basically shut down and you're using all kinds of alternative circuitous routes to serve the traveling public. So to me, the test case that we did for F1 that we later endorsed as being appropriate for permanency is analogous to New Year's Eve, and I'm comfortable that the record of statistics before us supports that. I'm fully committed to EDC and everything we can do there because of the public safety issues that I've seen. F1 is totally appropriate. So that leaves me with the larger conventions. I actually hearkened back to the testimony, although it was not resolved favorably to the applicant, that we took for almost a day in the independent cab case on the problems of servicing the convention center with the bigger conventions. But I am also sympathetic that we did not do any pilot program on conventions. So what I would suggest to the board is if you're more comfortable putting these conventions into a pilot program order, but I think we should explore that and see if supporting the bigger conventions is something that we should be doing or not doing. To my thinking, since the order is just a one-year order, and will be, I think that's the inclination of the board. I, like Member Graff, do not have a problem doing a test, basically a test on these larger conventions. I have regrettably had to go to some of these to see clients. It's not any fun to drive there, find parking and hike. It's also abysmal to get a cab. No offense. It's just the cab lines are at particular times are horrendous. So I'm comfortable with this order, with all of the events. I think that the convention events that were selected are the ones that kind of fit the rough criteria we were looking at size. I grant the administrator that we didn't do a pilot on that. I'm just wondering if you have, like, before I take one last walk through the board members, if you have any other thoughts you want to add before we take action. Please don't do conventions if that's how you feel.
No, it's not that at all. I don't have a big problem with entering into a pilot program either, because I just don't know how this is going to play out. And when it's my turn to speak at the end, I'm going to talk about complaints that we got over F1. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I just want to give you guys the facts. I mean, we had several complaints for F1, and I see New Year's Eve very similar, just like what you said, similar to what New Year's Eve is. So I think a pilot program would be great, to be honest.
Any other?
I'll just mention one other thing. Using Member Graff's example, I think that's a great example of kind of what I'm talking about. So, not to compare musical artists, but let's say the Sphere has a U2 concert, and the next weekend the South Point has a Jason Aldean concert, someone who's as big. The public's paying more because the sphere is less convenient for taxi cab drivers. Now, it's not the public's fault. It's not the industry's fault, the board's fault, not the state's fault. It's the way the venue, and theoretically, it's up to the venue to make that more convenient in the same way that the South Point did. So two, let's say, relatively equally big concerts, the public's paying more to go to one event than the other because of the something that's within the control of the venue. So in the event that these venues, and I remember when I was the administrator of this agency, we talked about doing this at the convention center, and I think the reason we didn't is because the convention center said, fine, as long as we get a cut. So I think that's only a matter of time that these venues start saying that. And then I wouldn't even be that opposed to that if that money was going to be guaranteed to be used to readjust the venue to make it more convenient for transportation traffic. But it won't be used for that. It can be used for whatever they want it to be. So the venue now is taking, in this hypothetical scenario, would be making more of a profit off of drivers, because the cab companies have to say, if you want 3 out of every $10 we take in a surcharge, do we add that 3 to, do we now make it a $13 surcharge, or do we pay the drivers less? So they're benefiting from the problem they created, whereas the South Point has alleviated the problem by the configuration, and so it's not an issue. So I've got a bit of an issue with that. I'm also concerned that where do we draw the line at events? I don't see the AVN in here.
Sorry?
AVN. I don't see. I was gonna say I don't see SEMA, but SEMA's in there. But every week, they say every night is Saturday night in Las Vegas. Every weekend there's something. There's something every weekend that creates traffic between the airport and the Strip. So at what point do we say, hey, we're just going to adjust the zone fares? So, or do we just make a huge master list of events and say there's basically a surcharge to all of these events, and then there's 2 days a year where there's no surcharge, and we're pretending that that's not a rate adjustment. So I'm going to still vote no on this for all of those reasons.
Mr. Chairman, as listening to your comments and rereading again as things were going on, I think I have, well, first I have a question, and it'd be really a question for the administrator. I notice that all of these events that are actually conventions or trade shows, it just defines at the event. Are you comfortable that's enough specificity that we know where the surcharge is going to be applied and where it's not?
Well, again, it's logistically, it's a bit of an issue because some of these events are spread out over so many different venues. I mean, you have them at the convention center, but then you have some of them over at Westgate or another casino. And so that's something that we've discussed briefly with the industry, and they may be able to give you a little bit more information than I can about it. But it is a concern for me too, because I don't want to see half of Las Vegas be geo-fenced in as a surcharge.
Okay. So that was my first question. My thought, as we tiptoe into this, I was looking, 3 of these shows, or actually, no, excuse me, 2 of these shows are in January 6th, January 21st, and then nothing happens again till April. And we could conceivably approve an order that have CES and SHOT Show in it. Delete NAB and delete SEMA for the time being, and ask that industry report back to us at the next available meeting after the SHOT Show, so we could kind of see and have a comfort level that this worked or it didn't. And then we could entertain a petition to add some sort of surcharge in April and in November for the other 2 units, if what we hear in the report is persuasive.
Or alternatively, we could carve those 2 events out and put them into a pilot program, not put them in the annual order, because the pilot program orders have all kinds of terms and conditions on them about reporting and whatnot. So I'd be comfortable. I get exactly.
You're
what
referring
you-
to CES and SHOT?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so
But
that would be
put those-
pilot.
Put those into a pilot program order because we have the reporting requirements and it's not a done deal.
Okay.
And I think that's worthy of consideration. That also, your point just now, Administrator, does concern me. What's the administration of this? And that we haven't really fully vetted, and that's why it's probably appropriate for a pilot. Thoughts?
Well, I'm listening to a lot of the comments you all are making, and I still appreciate some of the comments from Member Decker. I think it makes sense. It's like, although this conversation came about a year ago, prior to me coming on this board, it's kind of all over the place because one of the things I'm trying to differentiate in my head is a pilot and the categories, if you will. Because you also got to remember when you look at conventions and trade shows, you also got to consider the demographics. All right. And when I say the demographics, you would think CES, who does that cater to? Whereas the Magic show is a more younger demographic. That younger demographic is not going to get in a cab. They're going to take a ride share because that's the hip thing for them. Whereas SHOT shows that a lot of the older crowd, a lot of them love the traditional taxi cabs, And so I guess for me, I'd be interested in seeing how these categories are broken down because it's just really kind of concerning to me. I look at, for example, I've heard YouTube and Britney Spears. Well, let me give you one of mine. Kendrick Lamar is coming to Vegas. They're not like us, right? Yeah, I heard it before. All right. So Kendrick's show is already sold out here in Vegas. That's an Allegiant Stadium kind of show. A Beyonce show, which they're talking Sphere. They tested it. I think they were almost up to 3 days on that show. You look at the demographics, Mr. Chair, that I think that we need to take into consideration. I just don't think that we need to just throw something on a list because we want to test it and see, what it feels like or what it looks like. And at the end of the day, we want to put the industry in a position where they can thrive and they can achieve and, we're giving good quality service. But I think that if we're not careful, we're going to be all over the place. And I'm going to be really clear here. As we approach the 2025 legislative session, it's going to get crazy. The budget for Governor Lombardo is not going to be the budget he had in his last legislative session. And so he's already made it clear, that there's going to be folks called to the table that's going to have to put up. And you guys know the resorts industry, they fight like, excuse me, ladies, hell to not want to put in one more red cent. So where is this money going to come from? And so I say all that to say this. I think that we need to be really careful that we don't put ourselves in a position to receive like lots of unnecessary pushback because we're sitting here experimenting.
I'm going to tack on it. I agree with Member Weekly 100%. I think if I had to testify in front of the legislature as to why the board approved this list, I would not be able to rationally explain why the Sphere is on here, but Fremont Street isn't, or downtown where, why Life is Beautiful event is not on here, but CES is, or why we're gonna, pick one show but not another because it's at a different venue. I think in order to approve something like this and justify it, we need to have pretty well defined categories of what we're looking to do and what events or venues fall within those categories. And I think this is a little bit all over the place.
So, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'll reclaim, if you don't mind, just
No, go ahead.
60 seconds of my time. I think that's absolutely right, especially when you look at downtown now. You look at the World Market Center. World Market Center may bus in a lot of their participants, but they have a large amount of cabs that are down there as well. If you've never worked in the downtown area, you do see that participation. And so that area is starting to be picked up. Some folks would say, why didn't we put that on the list? Because it also has that kind of participation. For me, I just want to make sure that we put the industry in a great position to be able to take care of their drivers, to be able to stay modern and keep good maintenance on their vehicles. And, we just show that we're a good partner with the industry, not that we're an adversary against the industry. And so I can support, but right now I'm a little I'm on the fence with it because it's just all over the place. And I just need just a little bit more definitive type of structure here in alignment with Member Becker saying.
Before you, to your point, briefly, because you haven't been here during the pilot programs. That's, I think, why the vice chair and I were talking about carving out the conventions into a pilot program order, is that it is different. This doesn't have any reporting requirements. It doesn't say come back to us with statistics on how you did the geofencing, show us that you actually drove more drivers to work. And I'm convinced now, from what I'm hearing, that on the conventions, that should be done through a pilot order, which puts the burden back on the industry to come forward. The general order doesn't have any of that statistic requirement, nor does it provide for a subsequent hearing where we decide whether it was a success or a failure. And I think Member Decker is right. Putting those in a general annual order until we have some statistical support for it works or it doesn't work. I take the comments on this end of the table being probably inaccurate.
And let's not forget, prior to it works or it doesn't work, well, number one, that there is a problem that we're addressing.
Right.
Number two, that this works as a solution to the problem. Because I don't know that there's a problem to every single event that happens in Las Vegas. But it looks like we're kind of trying to splatter
Right.
the solution to F1 and EDC to everything that occurs in this town.
So go ahead. I just wanted.
So, yeah, I mean, New Year's Eve, F1, EDC, all logistical nightmares and kind of spur their own issue as to the surcharge. The conventions, I agree. I think Member Soderberg that was talking about, we don't have like a zone limitation on CES or SHOT Show. And I don't know if that alleviates some of your concerns in the sense, Member Decker, in the sense that if we limit that to certain zones, that sort of thing, in terms of pickup or drop off, that may alleviate some of that concern or issues. My understanding from the last couple of meetings was that the industry list, including these conventions and everything, was being presented as plus 100,000 attendees or plus 75,000. Okay, that's what it was. I saw a blank look and I knew that there was either that number or the other, but that was my understanding. Is when you're bringing in that many attendees, that's why they added these on there. So just so we're clear here on the record, that's what I had the understanding of. But I agree. I think that, right now, this order is a little bit, not vague in any sense, but I think that if we add zones to CES and SHOT Show for purposes of January, and then we do the same thing when we do any of these other conventions and make sure that it's specific. And I guess one of the questions that I need answered by, I don't know who, there's infrastructure remediation expansion being done at the convention center. Does that address or alleviate or confound any of these issues? So my understanding is the North Hall, Main Hall, and South Hall are all being revamped and that sort of thing. And I don't know if there's any exterior work that's being done that's going to affect any of the industry's ability to either get in or service those locations. So That'd probably be a good conversation to have also. That's all I have.
Any other thoughts? I'm going to suggest that this order be approved with the amendment that it apply to New Year's Eve, EDC, and F1, New Year's Eve in both this year and 2025. That would be the first motion.
Mr.
First
Chairman,
act.
so I'm clear, as you're excluding the sphere?
I am excluding the sphere, and my thought is, to Dr. Weekly's point, we're going to have Allegiant come and speak to us. Allegiant may, that conversation may cause us to want to revisit how we address the sphere issue. And because the Allegiant issue or situation is in spades what the sphere is. The sphere just, I think, has gotten a lot more attention simply because I think football fans are just probably more tolerant than concert goers. They bake that. I think people who go to athletic events bake into, okay, well, this is going to be a nightmare. The analogy I give is in college at one of my part-time jobs was at Disneyland. And you just, certain events, certain times of year, like Halloween and Christmas, you just went, okay, the parking in all of Anaheim is going to be horrible. So that's my suggestion as to this, to the first order, so that everybody knows where my thinking is going. I think a second order would be to set a pilot program on conventions. Here's my only concern. Administrator, do you think if we were to issue such an order for something starting January 6th that we can be up and running? Do you have a sense that could happen?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So I would suggest then a second motion, second order, putting CES and SHOT Show into a pilot program order. NAB and SEMA would fall out for some future consideration. So I'm thinking two orders along those lines. And then we'll revisit the sphere. When we get the convention information, we'll revisit that and see if there is a justification. I agree with Dr. Weekly on the following. We know that the authority is going to be under legislative review. And so I don't want anything to be injurious to the administrator's advocacy on behalf of retaining independence, if that's how he's directed to proceed or not, whichever way he is instructed by the governor to proceed. So I want to be neutral on that. But I also want it to be very clear that the industry's got to have, and I've said this many times, the industry's got to have our support for looking at creative things like surcharges to compete with the TNCs. They have, elsewise, the trajectory from history is that sooner or later, the cost of keeping a driver will exceed the value of keeping the driver. And that will be a challenge to the continuation of taxicabs, which are, in my view, a very important industry for Southern Nevada, for the health of the economy. So that's kind of the balance I see. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I'd entertain a motion, and then we can do any further discussion on each motion. Administrator, anything before we?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Well, let me take a stab here based on what I've heard. I would move that we approve the proposed order, save and accept pickups only at the Sphere, the CES show, the SHOT Show, the NAB show, and the SEMA show.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the annual order for New Year's Eve, EDC, New Year's Eve 2024 and 25, EDC 2025, and F1 2025 in the form the order has been presented to us. Ms. Webb, before we vote, do we need to, on page 6, you have some highlighted language?
I just wanted to verify the dates.
We don't,
Those are both made.
yeah, those, we don't have to worry about those, they're out of the order.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion on that order?
Yes, I'm 100% on the F1. I'm 100% on the EDC. I'm not sure that we've established, one, that there's a problem on New Year's Eve. Number 2, what the problem is, and number 3, that this will solve it. But because of the traffic limitations with the closing down of the strip, I'll vote yes for this in this motion. I would prefer that this be more like industry presenting us with results, and that this is actually getting something done other than just charging the public. But aside from that, I'm willing to vote yes on the first motion.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that order is out. Second, you willing to take a shot at the second one? Member Sutherland?
Sure. I would move that we approve a order establishing a pilot program for a surcharge on the CES show, the SHOT Show, and the SHOT Show, as delineated in the draft order on the prior motion, with industry reporting to the board at no later than their March regular meeting, vis-a-vis how the surcharge has worked, if has it successful in solving problems or not, and a report from the staff with regard to the specificity of when and where the surcharges would be applied. And I think with that, we would be able to know if these are something we should be doing or not, and if we need more specificity going forward if we were to entertain any other shows or events.
Before there's a second, can I suggest an illumination that we follow the reporting metrics that were in the prior pilot orders so that Ms. Webb knows how to draft it?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
One other question.
Yes.
We limiting those to certain zones.
I think that we're going to have to, it's a good point, Member Graff, I think we're going to have in the order that the administrator will define the pickup and drop-offs. It may be narrowly defined for, the actual convention center, or he may come up with some other brilliant plan that I'm comfortable giving him, as we have, like we did on EDC. You make sure that the geofencing is right.
Well,
As am I would leave that to.
He's put in
Park
the-
and Ms. Webb.
He's put in the order that it's pick up or drop off at the event. So
It
it's
it does say
irregardless-
that. I agree with that.
So it's regardless of where it's going, it's,
Yeah, I think what is the event though? The administrator's going to have, what is the official
Venue.
site of the venue? Yeah, I don't, that's not in the order. It
I
doesn't tell me. So I took from the administrator, it was a fair criticism. What is the event,
right, the
right?
venue for the event.
Is that every hotel that has
Gotcha.
somebody that's an attendee? No, that's not, I don't think that's what's intended. Yes,
So,
Ms. Webb.
at the bottom of page 9, paragraph 6, some of these shows, the CES and the SHOT Show, appear to be at 3 different places. Do you have any more clarification on where you would like the pickup and drop offs? I mean, I don't know if both of those are at all 3 places or not. I would like to be able to.
I think that is the discretion we're delegating to
Okay.
the administrator in defining the pilot. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
That I think, just for the clarity on this, I think that delegation allows him to say, I'm only going to look at the Las Vegas Convention Center, or he may want to have 2 venues like the Sands and the convention, but I'm comfortable giving him the ability to craft that specific, as he did with the geofencing on EDC. Anybody have difficulties with that?
Quick question. So, Mr. Park, dealing with the convention center, who are you talking with there? Is it Ed Finger or
As
in terms of,
No, there's a new gentleman over there, and I can't think of his name right now, but he's the one that runs the outside.
Patient services.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now. Chris.
we'll follow up after.
Okay.
Is there a second of that motion as
I'll second it.
massaged?
As long as Ms. Webb knows what we said.
Okay. Comments or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Okay.
Record should reflect 4-1. Anything else on that? Thank you, board members and Member Park. I think that got to the right result. We're on to agenda item 8, which is review and consideration of our advisory opinion pursuant to application of release from the LOA on interpretation of NAC 706-980. As the board members will recall, we have to take action either to issue or not issue the opinion by January 16. At our last discussion, or our last meeting, we discussed that, and we discussed what the opinion, draft opinion would indicate, and we suggested that the LOA may want to evaluate its options, and it has filed December 12th a request to withdraw the advisory opinion application, which would relieve us of our duties under the regulation under 980, and allow either a rulemaking petition or some kind of policy result to go back to the administrator. Right now, I think we're at, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're at we're accommodating the longstanding practice right now.
Correct.
Although there is continuing concern that it does not square with the law.
Correct.
And somehow we have to square it up with the law.
Question for the administrator.
Yes.
Mr. Administrator, was your agency given a BDR for this upcoming session?
No.
Is one available to you if you had law changes that you needed to pursue?
I doubt for this session. I doubt it.
Well-
can I, yeah, so I think, I don't think we need a BDR. I think we can repeal a regulation.
I think it's in NRS though, isn't it?
No, as I understand the opinion, the draft opinion, the problem is the definition that was made in the regulation.
Gotcha.
On the authority of the statute is what is the, don't I have that right, Ms. Webb?
You have it right, and we are planning to do rulemaking. The LOA was going to ask for it, but we're already in the process.
Okay.
And we can do a temporary reg.
Yeah, we can do a temporary reg. So,
Gotcha.
So I don't think we need to ask the legislature to weigh in here. I think it's a problem of our own making.
Gotcha.
Okay. Or our predecessors' own making.
Okay.
I won't even tag you with that.
No.
It's a hard. So what is before us is to quote my mother, who will roll over in her grave when I say this: are we hell-bent for leather to issue the opinion, or are we? Do we want to entertain the request for withdrawal? And I'll entertain a motion on that.
I move to entertain the request for withdrawal.
Second that motion. It's been moved and seconded to accept the withdrawal of the application. Any additional comments, questions, concerns? I think this is probably the right result. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Administrator, staff report.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to just start with F1. Well, first of all, we have a new enforcement member I'd like to introduce to the board, Michelle Campbell. She just started with us a couple of weeks ago. She is currently in field training, and she came to us from gaming control. So we're excited to have her. She's got a ton of experience, and she's going to be just a great asset to our agency. So I appreciate her showing up today with her FTO.
Welcome.
Are you an alumni of enforcement?
Yes,
Okay.
and I do recognize you.
That may not be good. Do you recognize Ms. Rushton? The usual suspects.
Handcuffs on though.
Yeah, it's good.
But I wasn't in handcuffs, was I? No, okay.
Are they doing UPTs today? In plain clothes? No.
No.
No. I was going to get excited for a minute. Okay.
I will tell you that Michelle got one last week.
Nice.
So, yeah, her first one.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about F1. It just ended, and this is our first board meeting since F1. And we had 22 documented complaints. And the thing that was a little bit different this year than from last year is the amount of anger that our dispatchers received over the surcharge. We had at least half of them, the people were just aggressively angry. And in one instance, Metro was called to try to quell the issue at hand. And I think one thing that we need to do better in all of these surcharges is signage. And I'm not quite sure what that answer is right now, but I think we need to be better at getting the word out, because people are getting hit with the surcharge that have no idea about it. And I know that that's not completely our responsibility, but if we can do a little bit better in that area, I think that would help quite a bit. We had one of my dispatchers almost was in tears because we had a elderly person that just needed to get to the store, and her residence was in the geofenced area, and she got stuck with surcharge, and just a horrible situation. I don't know if you can actually remedy that, but I just want you guys to know that those complaints are out there, and we get them. So basically, the complaints are over the surcharge for F1. I wanted to bring up I think, did you guys get the graphs on F1 and the surcharges? The rides for F1 this year, we're a little bit down from last year, which I think would be expected because last year was the first year and I think there was a lot more interest and I still believe there's a lot of interest in F1. A ton of people come to town. But one of the things I'd like to point out is about halfway through the surcharge, it drops off. The rides really go down, and whether that's because people don't want to pay the surcharge and are taking other means of transportation, or they're just in the race area and aren't moving around. I'm not sure what the reason is, but I thought in both years it was pretty evident that about halfway through the surcharge, the rides just really drop off. The other thing I thought was interesting is this year, after the surcharge drops off, you see a huge upswing in rides, and actually the same in 23. If you remember, we did have one less day in this year's surcharge. And so Tuesday is the day that it starts to kind of upswing, which normally our Tuesdays are kind of our lower end of rides. But I just wanted to point those statistics out for you guys while you're thinking about surcharges and F1s and things like that. So, let me go ahead and get into the stats. Our total monthly trips, they're down a little bit. This last month, we didn't even break 1 million. I don't have good reasons for it other than, during F1, they build everything up, and after F1, they're tearing everything down. And so I think these 2 months in October and November, I think is affected. The rides are affected because of the construction that's going on around the valley. The revenue, you can see between last year and this year is down about 5.68%. The lease revenue is about the same. The monthly combined trip comparison, if you drop off December because it shows a 100%, which really skews the numbers, we're actually only, I think, I remember right, it's like about 40,000 rides down a little bit, and that's basically a day and a half's worth of rides. So it's not as bad as what it looks on the paper because that 100% kind of skews that. I think that the next stat is the year-to-date comparison, and that's just a conglomeration of everything we've been talking about right now. The medallions have not changed. The lease decals were at 1743. And then for the agency stats, our citations, we had 89. We had 99 violations on the 89 citations. We had 10 impounds for the month, which is quite a bit up. We did work with another agency over F1, and we were able to get more impounds during F1 because of that. And just so you know, we are planning something for CDS that's coming up as well. And because I'm talking about impounds real quick, I wanted to point out, Curtis made me a pie chart. I love pie charts. So in 2016, we had 29 impounds. In 2024, we have 62. Last year we were down, we were short-staffed. We were down at 43, but the year before we were at 61. So I think we're really kind of right at where we have been in the past.
I'm waiting for you to break my 2021 record.
What is? Oh yeah. What happened that year?
We just went out and hit it.
That was
Yeah.
okay. Well, challenging
All
you
right.
now.
2025 is going to be your year.
Okay. All right. But we have a great enforcement staff. We've got new people. We've got energetic people, and things are looking up. And I think in December we're going to look pretty good too. They've really been out hitting it, and we're getting people trained. And I'm actually looking at we have a schedule change that's going to take place in January, and hopefully that's going to be able to dedicate more people to just UPT enforcement. So we'll kind of like our pilot program for our schedules. So I'm not sure what other stats that we really need to go over. Our accidents are usually right around that same number, between 300 and 350. Our lost properties, again, those are always a big number.
I will mention, you have a nice spread on the citation violations, which is an improvement over, certain ones being constantly hit.
Yeah.
You guys that means you're looking at all of the violations within your jurisdiction.
Yeah. And I'm going to attribute a lot of that to our FTO program. We've changed our FTO program up from what it used to be, and so we're getting more information out to the new hires, and our enforcement guys are taking care of business much better than they used to. So thank you for pointing that out. Really, those were the only things that kind of stuck out to me during this last month for the statistics. I am pleased to announce we broke 3,100 cabs in service now. We're at 3,106, so our number of cabs is going up. And I'm happy to take any questions if you guys have any.
Was there a difference in the signage last year with F1? I mean, we had like 2 or 3 complaints, as I recall. Pardon?
It was the same. We copied it the same.
Yeah.
And just
Okay.
surprised that it changed from one year to the next.
I'm that it would go up much. Surprising.
And
I get the people that are caught in the zone. I'm just trying to go to the grocery store.
Right.
That's a problem we need to think about.
The one more thing that I did want to add, not statistical wise, is, and Ms. Webb already mentioned it, but we are putting together a workshop for the regulations to take a look at those. And that's probably my highest priority right now, is to get those NACs looked at, and changed. And
So are you doing more than just the one, right?
yes. Yeah, we're actually going through all the NACs, and we're going to make changes. We're going to meet at least once, maybe twice with the industry, and then we're going to come back and speak with you about it.
Well, you might remember, probably a couple years ago now, industry was directed to come up with a list of NACs that were, so they should have a nice prepared list for you.
We've been in contact with each other.
You have a copy of the suggestions I gave to Member Decker when he was administrator?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
If you have it,
I'll
please
send it
forward
to
it.
you.
Okay.
Okay. We were told no.
Right.
No rules.
Right.
Any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Park, in your presentation here, you had spoken of a situation that happened with an elderly resident. And I guess my question, Mr. Chair, would be, I don't normally see a lot of cabs in neighborhoods, right? But I would say that for a lot of elderly people who may need that transportation, a lot of them are fearful of Uber and Lyft and all of that. They don't get it. They don't have the downloads or the apps. And so they're old school, like me. just dial a number. And I guess I would want to know, Mr. Park, have you spoken with representatives in the industry to find out how do we deal with situations like that? Because I'd hate to hear that, an elderly person who we all know is on a fixed income and just need a ride and probably could afford that. And that ride probably is taking away a meal or, a medication. And I used to represent, back in my old days, I used to represent a lot of constituents like that. And, to know that there are people out there who halfway can't afford their medication, or they get their medication and say, for example, if it's a pill, they're breaking them in half to kind of preserve. I'm not trying to create some type of charity case here. I'm just saying a consideration. What do we do, or what's the industry do in a situation like that when it comes to those type of surcharges for residents that may need that type of help?
Thank you for your comments. We have spoke with the industry, not only about that, but wheelchair accessible vehicles. We have a TAP program. It's a taxi assistance program for elderlies that's ran by Department of Human or Aging Services. And they have coupons, which I believe this person had a coupon. And the surcharge was more than what the coupon would pay, so they had to pay out of their pocket. And that was the complaint that we had received. I understand the industry, the drivers want to make money, and the strip corridor is where that money is. But I also feel like it's very important to get out into the neighborhoods, and you are 100% right, where people of my age and above would rather take a cab than they would take ride shares. So I don't have a great answer as far as making the drivers to get out there. I think that's on the industry to be able to do that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. Just like for those representatives that's in the audience from the industry, it's my hope and my prayer that that's something that we can take into consideration when we're talking to our drivers. We understand our drivers have families to support and responsibilities, and I respect that 100%. But I just go back. I'm a native Nevadan, and I just go back to the days when we didn't know anything about a Uber or a Lyft or any of that stuff. We just saw taxicabs, and it's an old school industry like barbershops. It's an old school industry, and even I love the fact that you can go in barbershops and they still, there's just one barber in there that still has a box of treats in his down drawer, and he always gives the kids a little treat or something. That's kind of how taxicab drivers are. Just always been some of the coolest people on the planet, and so I just hope that we don't forget that and keep in mind people who really need help. I mean, be a blessing, and you shouldn't be surprised. A blessing will be returned to you. So I'd like to put that out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else on stats?
I do have a question with regard to impounds. A while back, I was relatively new on the board. Prior director, prior legal counsel, expressed to me that in many of these impounds, it's business as usual for the individual. They show up with the cash because they know what they're going to be paying to get their vehicle out, and they just do it. So it has not, the impounding and the fees that we are charging, and it was expressed to me that there was a graduated rate, first offense, second offense, that sort of thing, that it is not a deterrent. It is a cost of doing business. And it is not unusual to see an individual a few months later. As long as they got their Escalade back, that's just fine. It was an irritation to them. And I guess the first question is, are you seeing that? And then the second question is, our fine schedule, does that need to be addressed, considering it's been a few years and it does not appear to be a deterrent?
Well, you're right. We do have a lot of repeat offenders, and I think that they become more sophisticated. They don't just work by themselves anymore. They have a group of people that go out and work, and they even have pre-shift briefings, and they show
our investigators pictures and show what vehicles our investigators are driving. So if you pull into a place and see that, my point is they're getting much more sophisticated. Most of them come in saying how destitute they are, but then they pull out a wad of cash and pay the fine. And so, yeah, we see quite a few repeat offenders. That would take probably an act of legislation to get the fee schedules changed. I think Ms. Webb does a great job with vetting first, second, third offenses and repeat offenders. And do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, I would say this, I mean, with the UPT in particular, I can go up to $5,000 on the first one. And as far as seeing repeat offenders, once in a while, by the time they come in a third time, a lot of them are taxi cab drivers and that do it on the side. And so by the time they come in, I don't see anybody a fourth time. And I'm not sure why. I think because I escalate the fee. But I do look at what kind of car they drive. And if it's an old beater, I believe it could be a government taking if I fine them too much on the first go round, because the fine would generally be more than what their car is worth. But by the time they come back again and they can't pay the fine, then it sits in impound for a long time. And so I think our fines are working okay. I don't think we have as many repeat offenders as you might think that we can catch.
That was part of my question.
Yeah, we don't have that many that I think the fine would make a difference with.
Well, one of the things you can do in the event you get a BDR is ask the legislature to approve graduated criminal penalties. First offense, I think it's currently a misdemeanor, but repeat offenses go up, gross misdemeanor, up to felonies if it's fine becomes over a certain amount. I wouldn't recommend doing it this session because you don't want LCB to put a fiscal note on your bill on behalf of the Department of Corrections. And you don't have a VDR, but maybe in a couple of years.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. You're saying you are impounding vehicles of illegal operators who are actually licensed taxi cab drivers. That's the first I've heard of this.
Sometimes.
So it does happen. What happens to their license?
They weren't driving taxis at the time. We have not suspended them for them getting impounded in their personal vehicles.
So you can violate state law with regard to the state's regulation of taxi cab, but still be considered a licensee in good standing.
Correct.
I would say this, if I may. If they're a taxi cab driver or an Uber driver that just decides to go off app because it's easy and there's an easy ride, I do increase the fine. They should know better what the law is.
But there's no consequence to their status as either a licensee with this agency or with our sister agency.
Yeah. I can't speak for the NTA. Since I've been the administrator, one of the biggest issues for the industry is having drivers in cabs. And it's certainly something that I can take into consideration and take a look at. But I really hate to hit the industry in their driver pocketbook.
I understand.
That's just,
and I'm not suggesting that you're doing it wrong.
yeah.
I was just surprised to hear that. I would assume if I violated the law in a particular area and I was licensed by that, under that law, that I'd be in, quite frankly, deep shit. And you're telling me, not really because of other policies, and I'm not saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear it.
I will say that if they're fined and they don't pay their fines, then I do suspend their permit. So if they come in and take care of their obligations, then I have not been suspended.
If these individuals are licensees, are their certificated employer notified?
Not by us, but that has been discussed.
Okay,
Not by us at this point.
okay. So this Balaban's got a driver that tonight is operating illegally and is impounded. He never knows about that,
Not by
even though
us.
the industry has urged the agency to increase enforcement in this area.
Correct. Not by us.
Regardless of what he might want to do with that information, he just isn't told this.
Yes.
Okay. And if I am a rideshare driver and I have to be approved by the rideshare company, and I go off their platform and conduct an illegal ride, the rideshare company is never notified of that. That essentially that driver is stealing from the rideshare company.
From my experience at the NTA when I worked there,
Mm-hmm.
they were normally notified on the first offense. Nothing really happened.
Okay.
Maybe even the second offense. The third offense, they would kick them off the act.
Okay. Okay. But they are notified at the NTA level, but not at the TA level.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, and I'm not suggesting it should be done any different way. I was just curious. And, you know, one answer leads to another question, and I know we're burning daylight here, so I'm going to stop.
Well,
But this has been very enlightening. Thank you.
I would just say that it has been discussed within, between my supervisors and I on doing that. And I've spoke with Ms. Webb about the legalities of throwing that information out there.
Okay.
But your feeling might be different if in the rulemaking we're getting ready to do, a regulation was passed that made clear that there were sanctions.
That would be great.
Is there anything different for the NTA versus TA as to regulations or statutes that allowed the NTA to provide notice to those companies?
That I'm not sure of. They have their own specific statute. Their statute is separate from our statute as far as impounds go. And so I don't remember. I'm not sure.
So what's holding us back from notifying the cab company of the licensee that gets arrested for UPT or a citation for UPT?
The only thing is making sure enforcement knows how to do it. That's all.
Well, here's a question. When you issue a citation to a cab driver for, let's say, not a big all laws, does that get sent to the carrier?
No.
No. So it's not practice in any case to know.
I think that the NTA might have a reporting requirement
In,
to do that, but we don't.
And who has that duty to report it?
At the NTA, I don't know.
The driver or the company?
Oh,
That's what I'm asking.
I believe the NTA has the duty.
Yeah, the
to
agency
report.
sends a notice.
I mean, we only had 10 last month. Why can't we just, and of those 10 last month, how many were taxicab drivers, if at all?
10 citations or in there.
We had 10 impounds, it looked like.
How many?
Probably 2.
Two? It's 20%.
Here's the industry. Do they want to know?
Of course we do.
I would like to.
Of course we want to know.
Then
Okay.
maybe put that on the agenda next month, an issue to determine whether or not there should be a rulemaking procedure put in place.
Well, if
for-
we have a rulemaking coming,
Yeah, I guess.
we can just
do it
tack
that
on.
way.
And I remember you want to be notified on the rulemaking.
I would recommend including all violations, whether on or off duty.
Yeah.
Because if someone's speeding around in one of George's cabs, getting tickets, probably wants to know that.
Or the,
We used to get that, the TA used to send it out monthly, it's like all the ticket lists, to all of us. We all get, we get
used
every
to
month,
get it, especially on the long hauling and, yeah.
every citation.
And it was determined that since the citations had not been adjudicated, that it was improper for them to send the information. We all have rules that state any citation issued to a driver, they're supposed to inform us of that. But as you can imagine, it's in their best interest not to do so. But the agency did used to provide us the citation list.
Well, that's why a rule, LCD sanctions is a solution to that.
Yeah.
Any other questions of the administrator on that? Ms. Webb, anything to report as legal counsel? Our DAG is decided to leave us for a moment, so you don't get that report. Future agenda items, will you coordinate with the Legion to find a acceptable date for them to attend? Anything else on agenda item 9? Not to prolong your agony, but I would like to reopen agenda item 7 and amend the 2 orders based on some things I just heard. Is there anybody who has an objection to that? Just to read. Okay. On agenda item 7, the special event surcharge matter, I'd like to suggest that we amend those orders to provide that the surcharge need not apply to any person who presents a coupon for senior or handicap or other services. I think that is an immediately capable I see some shaking of heads. It seems to me you can flip off.
It's a meter issue, right?
Right, yes. The meter is geofenced to automatically charge that surcharge. And if the driver doesn't charge what's on the meter, the driver would actually be in violation of existing law.
So it can't flip off meter
Correct.
1 to, can't turn back on meter 1.
It was intended that way with the smart meters for the driver to not have that control, to ensure the accuracy of the meter fare based on the actual geographic location.
Those coupons, are they a monetary amount or are they a?
50% off.
How much?
I'm sorry.
50. So for $2, they get $1 off.
The majority of people pay 50%.
Okay.
Is there a way to change the amounts of the coupons?
I've met with the TAP program people. Good question. I'll have to reach out and ask.
Special events, different coupons.
Okay, well, it sounds like that can't be fixed. The second item is if we've got a signage problem, I think there should be a back of the seat notice requirement. I know that is an imposition on the industry, but going from 2 or 3 complaints to 20 complaints, most of which are, I didn't have notice. If there were a back of the seat signage, I purposely rode some cabs during one of the special events. The only way I could see on one cab was to actually crane my neck around and see what was on the meter. That was where the notice was. Another one, it was on the credit card pay display. So that to me on back of the seat, but if somebody's not got some other back of the seat method, and I'd like to see if that cures some of the complaints, because I think it puts the administrator in a difficult position with the administration and the public if he's not gone that extra mile. So my request is to amend those 2 orders to have back of the seat notice, however that's done. If you would entertain that, and I guess we'll have to live to fight another day on the coupon issue. Is there any interest in that? request for an amendment.
Is that something that needs to be in the order, or is that something we can direct the administrator to work out with industry?
I think the method, but we don't, on the permanent order, we don't have any noticing, any specific noticing requirements. So noticing on the pilot program, we gave to him authority to work out the posting, the noticing. We don't have anything in the permanent order on what's inside the cab.
Gotcha.
I'd make such a motion. And I'd turn around and say, I guess I hadn't been in a cab during a special event
Yeah.
because that's, for me, time to stay home. But I kind of assumed it already was. So this is news to me that you'd sit in the back of the cab, but you wouldn't know about a surcharge.
You would
So
only
I
know,
just, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I guess I made it the assumption that these people were, at least had constructive notice of it.
if you're in the airport, you walk out, you can see it on the board. And in most of the cabs, you can see it on the credit card screen. But there was one where if I hadn't have looked around to see it up on the dashboard, I wouldn't have.
We also need specific notice for drunk people.
I got it. Belligerent drunk people. I heard a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Member Weekly, I take to heart your concern about taking care of the elderly. We got to figure out a way to do that. I thought I had a brilliant method, but apparently I don't. We'll revisit that.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? If there's none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Can I ask you to check on how we might address the senior, the local getting captured in the geofencing? I know that you thought about it.
Yeah, I'll get in touch with the people that administer the TAP program and see.
Takes us to agenda item 10, which is our second public comment session. Oh, our DAG stack. Do you have anything legal reports we need to know? Great. We haven't been sued lately.
Not to my knowledge.
Takes us to agenda item 10, which is our second public comment session. This matters on our agenda pursuant to NRS Chapter 241, Nevada Open Meeting Law. It's time for people, members of the public, to bring matters to our attention within our jurisdiction. We may not take action on those matters, but we welcome any public comment. Is there public comment? Yes, there is in the room.
Mariano Locaccio, General Manager of Deluxe Taxi. I just want to prove some insight on New Year's Eve. 2002, when I started driving, to 2017, there was a lot of local business door to door. People grabbing stuff, going across town. When Uber or Goober and Lyft came in, it went down to 50-50 the first 4 years, then it went to 70-30. As the industry could tell you, the last 2 years, it's probably 90-10. So you're right, everything's still the same where the I-15 locks up, the strip locks up, but these guys have nowhere to make any money. That's why it was put on there. And the second one in the Sphere, so in case you go to Carson City, the second one on the Sphere is I timed it, and I've been there 4 times, and lucky me for Thanksgiving, I got stuck in a situation there for 4 hours because Metro couldn't come out. When I was timing these guys coming on, in and out of the Eagles concert, which if you're paying $600 for a ticket, you ain't worried about, it's about 40 minutes, 35 anywhere to 35 to 45 minutes. And when these guys come in and take me to the Win, his whole day just went south. So that's why they don't go there. Just want to clarify.
So it's short trips.
Yeah.
And I
Long
ain't gonna
waits.
lie. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a good New Year.
Morning.
Good morning.
George Balvin, Desert Cab Company. So the whole discussion was happening during the surcharge. I wanted just to address a couple of things that were happening. Not to completely push back on this, but when the surcharge item happened for EDC, we do surcharges for multiple different reasons. Some are specific to an event and where it's at, which was EDC, because we have drivers that are going to work and we're trying to figure out how can we get them incentivized to drive all the way out there, deadhead out there. So that was kind of specific to that. But with Uber and Lyft in town, who surcharge during big events, we also were coming to you and talking about, can we put on a surcharge to incentivize drivers just to work for us and not go leave and work for Uber and Lyft, which a lot of cab drivers, not all of them, but a good portion of cab drivers have Uber licenses, Lyft licenses, whatever, TNC licenses, and drive cab. And on their days off, they go and drive for Uber and Lyft, and they pick and choose when they can go there because they know there's going to be surcharges. So our thought was, let's see if we can put on something that we can do to get them to incentivize them to work for us. Then F1 comes along, which is a combination of a little bit of the things I was talking about, and it's just such a pain in the butt, right? Drivers are like, listen, it's whether there's a surcharge or not, I just don't even want to go mess with this. Oh, well, maybe a surcharge, maybe that will incentivize me to work. Uber and Lyft was doing it, but anyway, so there's all these different reasons. So because EDC has been coming for a long time before we did a surcharge, so we changed for that. Mm-hmm. The conventions, when we have conventions, it's the same thing. When we came in and talked to you about doing surcharges, it was the board's idea we don't want to see this every month. Can you guys go figure something out for a year? So yes, it looks like a hodgepodge for all different kinds of reasons, because that's kind of what you put back onto us. So we're trying to do what you asked to say, because as far as we're concerned, or at least I don't want to speak for them, as far as I'm concerned, it's very hard for me to tell you in a year what all that is going to be. Mm-hmm. We always thought it was going to be, we're going to ask for a surcharge for CES, and we just are going to pilot it, try it, whatever you want to call it. And if it's a disaster, we won't ask for it next year. Mm-hmm. But you guys kind of asked us to give us for a whole year. So we did. And I completely understand you saying, well, I don't know about this. We should just try it. Well, that's kind of what we wanted to do. But I understand you don't want to hear every month about a surcharge. So I'm all for testing it and taking little baby steps, because we're going to find out, oh, that was too much. We need the surcharge to be smaller. We need it to be less. During CES, is a combination of venue specific, because it's the convention center, is also trying to keep drivers driving for us, because it's going to be all kinds of surcharges if you're driving for Uber and Lyft. So I got two things happening at the same time. So I can incentivize drivers to come to work for me. And if I get them all to come to work for me because there's a surcharge all over town, that kind of defeats the purpose, because people that aren't going to the convention center are paying a surcharge. Right. So we thought we're going to do both. We'll surcharge to get drivers to work. And those drivers that are going to come to work for us are going to be going, I don't want to go over to the convention center, because it's going to take me 40 minutes to deadhead into there, just like it would be to go to EDC to go pick up one ride. There's 4 rides on the strip. I'm going to stay here. Oh, wait, I'll get a surcharge if I'll deadhead in there, because the ride that's going to leave there is going to pay me more. So again, it was an incentive to work during the busy time, as well as an incentive within that time to go to a specific place. So, and again, I'm not saying it's even going to work, but our whole idea was we have to try this. And then you kind of threw back to us, well, okay, give us a whole year's worth. Be like, oh, wow, you're really asking us to try to just throw this all out there. And I agree with you 100%. This could look terrible if it's in order. I really thought today's whole thing was just a pilot. We were just going to try this. And I assumed, and I know maybe it's hard to do an order that way, was that if you voted for this, and if during the CES, he was saying this was a disaster, that you wouldn't let us do it for the rest of the conventions. I'd be back here and say, well, let's try it for SEMA, because as was brought up, the people that are going to these events are all different. Mm-hmm. The reason the rodeo gets really good service is multiple things. It's not busy in town. Mm-hmm. The only people that are here are for the rodeo. So the cab drivers are like, okay, well, the Thomas and Mack is relatively easy to get into. Compared to the Sphere, it's night and day. And there's really not much else going on the strip. So we're going to go over there. And third, the Cowboys tip. CES, they don't tip. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to deadhead into CES to go pick somebody up when I could have 3 or 4 rides up and down the strip to pick up, a cheapskate, in their opinion, that's not going to tip. So it's complicated. It's a lot of different things. It's the demographics of what the crowd is. And again, there is no science to it. We're just trying. And again, the big pictures are within the drivers, When they're out there, how do we incentivize them to go provide service to the places that we want them to go so we don't have complaints? The convention center, the Sphere, EDC. So we're providing service. The other part is getting them to work so they don't go drive for TNCs. And then the third thing is that the driver is looking at the demographics of the crowd that they're going to pick up and deciding if there's no surcharge, is it worth fighting to get in there? Yeah, they're really good tippers. It is. They're not really good tippers, so it's not. So there's a lot to it. And I just wanted to share that it's a bunch of different things. And as far as I'm concerned, what you've done is in order right now is just fine. Let's test this thing out. The fact that CES and SHOT Show are so close together, it probably makes sense to pilot them both because it'd be hard to get back in here to do one or the other. But in providing the statistic to you, we don't know either. We're just kind of guessing. For New Year's Eve, yes, we've had it for a long time. But back when I drove cab, the strip didn't close. We've been closing the strip now for a number of years. And the number of drivers, we would come in and ask for way more medallions because we had drivers that wanted to work and we had no medallions to. I mean, there was a line of people signing up to drive New Year's Eve because it was basically a license to steal. It was just on everybody. You know, fighting to get in your cab, you need them so bad. Over time, because the strip closes down, Uber and Lyft come into town, they're surcharging. Our drivers are like, it's just not worth the hassle. And if I am going to go deal with it, I'm going to go drive an Uber and Lyft where I can make some real money. I'm not going to drive a cab. So we have to incentivize them. We don't have to, but if we want cab service, we need to incentivize them to come drive for us to deal with the hassle or not drive in the other cars. So I just want to share all that with you.
Thank you. Maybe we need to come up with an incentive for permitted cab drivers to give up their TNC permits.
Yeah, well, maybe, one of the things that occurs to me though is that the TNCs, while they may put somewhere on the app that you're currently in surge pricing, I don't think they show the difference between what the price would have been and what they're charging you. And so there's a disadvantage because people might get upset about a $10 surcharge, but they're going to be completely unaware that if they took Uber, they'd be paying $70 in surge pricing, and somehow, so there's still it doesn't quite address, it doesn't even out the playing field, I guess.
I think you have identified, George didn't identify it in the same way, but the challenge that we are in, we can only move so many levers,
right,
given we have rates. And we move those levers and we see if we get a response or not. And that's why I think moving the conventions into a pilot program is the right thing to do, because then we'll gather the statistics and see if it did or didn't work, to George's point. But any other public comment at this time in the room? Seeing none, is there anybody remotely participating that wants to comment? Nope, seeing none, then we'll close the second public comment session, and that takes us to adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any discussion other than happy holidays, everybody, and thank you.
Merry Christmas.
We'll be in adjournment.
So there was a sign that says, should we go back to